developer career coaching and level up projects with PyByte's co-founder, Bob Belderbos. Bob, how are you doing today? It's wonderful to have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks, Chris. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invite. And I think we have a pretty exciting topic to talk about.
I recently restarted the 100 Days of Code, so I stacked up a bunch of questions for this. I'm also going to leverage this as like taking notes for Chris for his next level too. So I'm super jazzed about this. Before we get into it, let's go through some show notes. Get in on the conversation. If you are in the live studio audience, then we will be answering the questions of the live studio audience. If you are on Twitter, if you are on Threads, if you are on LinkedIn, if you are on Mastodon, we will also be answering your questions. If you either at vBrownBag or hashtag vBrownBag, we'll be paying attention. But the best way to get to us is to actually talk in the in Twitch or stream, because that's kind of what I'm predominantly watching. So Bob, and Shala. Good morning, Shala. How are you doing? No, good afternoon. My bad.
Shala.
Hello. I am a little bit sick, so I am on some cough medicine right now, but I am here.
You sound fantastic. I can't even tell. All of the vBrownBag hosts are a little bit under the weather today, so it's perfect. We're all in this together.
Get better.
All right. There we go. That's much more cozy, much more personable. So, Bob, for those of you that don't know, would you mind introducing yourself? I totally skipped over that part because I got so excited, but you have a vast background and skill set that everybody here would love to know more about.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I originally studied finance back in the Netherlands, and then I decided to move to Spain 20 years ago. And I had to kind of find a job. So I landed in IT support, doing Unix server support. And that's where I got introduced to scripting and Shell and Bash and all that stuff. And that kind of piqued my interest. See how you can automate things and use coding. So then I self-taught web development or web design at HTML, CSS, PHP, and was doing shell scripting and to also build automation tools for the support organization. Mm-hmm. And I ended up building quite a large tool to parse telemetry, server telemetry. And that was kind of my ticket into coding, programming, and what later became software development. Mm-hmm. And in 2012, I ended up with a code base that was in Perl, and it was horrible. It could not be further maintained. I needed some classes and a bit of better, reorganization of the code. So I told my manager, "Can we refactor? Do you allow me to take one step back and then we go 10 steps forward?" So we refactor it. Mm-hmm. And I shopped around, found Python, found it very intuitive. So taught myself that, rewrote the code, became much better, much more maintainable. We never looked back. And I got really excited about Python, just, how elegant it is, how well it reads, how easy it's to work in. However, as easy it is to get started in, how profound it actually is, right? How much depth there also is in that language. And since then, I've been doing most of my work in Python. I transitioned in Oracle to a software developer role, worked on the Textura payment management stack, started PyBytes end of 2016, teaching Python through courses and a coding platform we built. And since 2020, we went into one-to-one coaching, helping developers upskill and become better developers.
So I didn't know that. I thought that Python was not your first language, but you picked it up in 2012. Not as your okay, interesting. You're so big in the Python space that I just assumed that you were always in it and always around it. So that's cool.
It was an enlightenment, right? Coming from PHP and Perl and never look back.
The way that a lot of folks in the Python space call it, they say it's the second best language for everything, with the exception of AI, I guess. It's the primary language for AI, but it's a great glue language. And if you want to then go down the rabbit hole of like professional game development, then you get into C# or C++. But you can just as easily make a really fun game, a 2D game using Python or something. But it's a great initial first language to learn, and it's a great carryover language for a lot of other stuff too. And as Mike mentions, Python is on Mars too.
The other thing that triggered me is you saying games being made in C++. I will forever be triggered by C++. That was my first language in college, and oh boy.
I said C# and C++. I didn't start at C++. I wouldn't do you that, Shala. What are you talking about?
But it was there. It was mentioned. It's like, oh no, not C++.
My first language in college was Java, so I still have scars from that. Okay, so the developer career coaching stuff that you've been doing, I'm really interested in learning where that came from, what made you get into that, and how you got the body of knowledge to start to be able to help others, level up in their career paths. Because right now I was hoping that Sean would be here. He was going to be our advanced programmer. And then me and Shala were going to be the beginner programmers, and Roger was going to be the intermediate programmer. So that we could have like different Q&A scenarios happening here. But we're gonna have fun with this regardless. So how did you get into it? What caused you to go, I want to start helping people?
Yeah, a couple of things. So we started as PyBytes end of 2016 with a tech blog, and a really gazillion tech blogs out there, but we just want to, Julian, myself, so also my best friend, we were talking about, entrepreneurship and doing something for years, and ultimately that crystallized in Python, right? So he wanted to learn it from scratch. I already used it for a couple of years and wanted to get better. So we launched this tech blog and we started writing, and right off the bat we had this practical edge to it. We started to do these code challenges on the blog. Like we would launch a code challenge on Monday, and then on Friday we would show the solution and build a community around it to learn and grow as developers. So that was there from the start. Then we went on with Michael Kennedy to produce. We did 100 days of code ourselves first, writing code every day as deliberate practice, as we might talk about later, and that got us on his radar, on Michael Kennedy's radar, and we ended up doing 2 100 Days of Code courses. Meanwhile, also building a coding platform that now has 400 exercises, and was my foray into Django and AWS and all that. That was running successfully for a couple of years. We also started our Slack community. Now we moved to Circle, and we had at some point 3,000 people in the Slack, and we really built a community around it. That was all working fine. We helped a lot of people. Come 2020 or end of 2019, felt like, this is going well. It's fun. We help a lot of people, but it's all, even though it has deliberate practice and a practical approach, it's also still a bit one-way direction, right? Where we teach something or we give you an exercise, and it's kind of self-service. What can we do to have a bigger impact, right? One-on-one coaching. Actually, a year prior, I had signed up myself for a fitness coaching program as a client, and I got in a very good shape, right? So I was always doing fitness, but got stuck, and I want to have a professional help me, right? So I saw the light of coaching, how that one-on-one collaboration helped me. So a combination of us wanting to hit next levels, me having a coaching experience. Yeah, and so what's next? And we signed ourselves. We signed up then again as PyBytes, both of us, for marketing coaching, because as developers, you basically suck at marketing mostly. So we wanted to learn, and things came together, and it turned out to be an offer coaching program, and we started thinking about offers. And basically, the main thing is we wanted to have a bigger impact and help people one-to-one. And through that coaching, we learned how to wrap that in a program, a structured program, to get people from A to B, right? So I think these 3 things got us really into that. Yeah,
that's awesome. And in the structured program, you take folks at all levels, or is there a minimum bar that they need to have exceeded before they come in, or who is the perfect student for you?
Originally, yes. We started with our flagship PDM program, and we had people that already knew at least some Python, because what we do is we have, like, bootcamps typically have you build, they say what to build, right? And they have some sort of classroom and you do all the same thing. We flipped that upside down and we said, people should come to us with their idea. We want them to build something they're passionate about, something that links well to their prior experience and also goes well with where they want to go towards, right? We're very goal oriented. So yeah, in order to accomplish that, and we'll hit about these levels of projects later, I guess, people to build their own custom thing, they have to be intermediate, more or less, right? And then the goal was to get them to advanced by building those relatively complex applications. And that's still the flagship product. But we also are very passionate about teaching newer people. So last year we launched our PDI program, which is more or less a bridging program, right? That gets you from beginner or absolute beginner. So it can be somebody totally new to coding, but can also somebody that already did some Python, but they consider themselves fairly basic, to get that at the intermediate level. So it's a shorter program. It has capstone projects, so there we do tell you what to build. So yeah, we take on all levels now, basically. Yeah, and this year we're even working on specializations that after PDM, if you want to go into AI or entrepreneurship or web development, we're going to build on the other end as well.
Nice. And after we wrap, I want to go ahead and get the links from you for the PDI and the PDM program so that we can put them into the show notes so that folks will be able to reference this well into the future. Yeah. Cool. Okay. I really like that idea. The fact that you're, like you said, the boot camps have a regimen and they have a set of, like, build this hangman or build, this is how you make FizzBuzz or whatever like that. They come to you with an idea and then you basically craft a custom curriculum around their idea to help them level up. Yeah. Are you seeing a lot more success with that than the other way around? Because you did the 100 days of code, and so this is the flip side of that almost.
Yes, because 100 days. Well, if you do it in a course format, then you have a fixed structure. But when we did the 100 days, we flipped that around also a bit in saying, like, basically you have to do a script a day, which was tough. So we took turns. So I would do scripts on even days and Julian on uneven days. So
but
we
the students have to do them all. That's not fair.
But those are scripts. Yeah. But 100 days is more structured overall. Usually you have a set curriculum for that. And yeah, this is where we first have a chat. We first do ideation, mind mapping, and then set out the course. But however, the way we work with everybody is very similar in a sense. The apps might change, but the format is the same. One-to-one coaching, weekly meetings, code reviews, as much code as you submit, so it could be daily, and support network on the community in Circle.
Is the so I posted the link for the Circle. Is that public or is that private?
Public.
Okay, good. All right. Phew. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I was like, did I just?
So Circle is nice. Like, we have the public community, which is a replacement for Slack, because Slack got a bit too. It's more like a work tool, and this feels more like a forum, right? Yeah. But Circle's very granular, so the programs have their own space, and those are locked down. But the public part, everybody can sign up to, and I highly encourage you to do so if you're Python interested or developer, because it's ramping up now, and there are a lot of good discussions happening there now.
Oh, I've been enjoying myself. You invited me to it, I want to say about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I've been lurking. I haven't been contributing a lot, but I'm learning a lot just by reading everybody else's questions. I'm like, I got to Google that. That's a good question. Yeah. Nice. Okay, so we'll put that in the show notes too for folks to be able to jump in there as well. Okay, so obviously we don't want to give away the secret sauce, the way that you guys are making money, but if from a broad strokes perspective, let's kind of get into it. Well, how do you want to tackle it? Do you want to go through the tiers and give the recommendations for each one, or how would you like to approach that? And Shala, if you have questions, I can shut up because I've been talking a lot, haven't I?
You're fine. I'm trying to talk in between coughing, but like straight up. But no, I like this a lot. My wheels are already turning because I'm thinking this is nice for someone where you want to get better at Python. You have an idea of something you want to do, but you wouldn't mind having like some assistance to figure that out. And I think that's amazing because as Chris knows, and other people may know, I'm on a journey of where I create workshops for myself because the courses I noticed leave a gap where I could go do these courses all day long. But then when I go to work, sit down in front of a computer and need to actually do the thing, my mind goes blank and I'm just like, oh, wait, what do I do first? Because there's nothing there to guide me. And so I like this a lot. And I'm already thinking like, I have some stuff that I want to do with Python. I'm like, this may be perfect for me to reach out and be like, hey, so here's my idea. And I imagine it's that kind of, that process where, someone just kind of comes and they're like, this is what I would like to do. How do I get there?
Exactly. Yeah. So what really resonated with what you just said is that whole tutorial paralysis where a lot of people fall into. So they study software a lot. And then when it comes to implementation, then all of a sudden like, whoa, I actually didn't not much of all that study and learning has really sticks with me, right? Until you start implementing, right? So
why do you think that is? Why is it hard to transition from like a static project to real world getting stuff done?
Yeah, that's a great question because the tutorials overall are great, right? They're very detailed, well crafted, high quality. But I think mainly it's that they still are to a certain extent projects, smaller toy examples, or maybe even bigger projects, but very, I wouldn't say shallow, but it's all perfect and it's all working, right? And it's kind of a sample project. But if you go into the real world and you really want to build something custom, then you fall into all these even configuration and setup can already completely derail you, even getting to the coding stage, right? So there's often so much more around it that the tutorial doesn't show.
Right.
And I think, I was going to say, I think you hit the nail on the head because me being a brand new, well, I guess I can't say brand new anymore, but I did not have plans of being a DevOps engineer, but that's what happened. And so I'm still very close to where I remember having to learn all the things and stuff like that. And it's exactly that where one, you get like these custom acts from a client that's nowhere covered in the tutorial. So start there. And then like how you say, one thing you just said, the other thing, like one of my things was like, okay, I need to stand up Terraform for a client project. And I'm like, okay, I've done all these Terraform courses and tried out Terraform and done all these things. And when I sit down, I'm like, all right, I'm going to stand up Terraform for this project. And I go, but wait, where do I start? Because it's not already implemented. It's not set up for it, So it's the whole working in a space where you're not in the ideal setup. And then there's also, who I like to speak for into a lot. It's just straight up nerves because now you're like, wait, this is like in production and I can actually break something and it can cost millions of dollars. And so you have a bit of that paralysis too.
Yeah, great points. So we work backwards from a complex problem, and then we recommend and teach people to use JIT learning or just-in-time learning, and to ditch the tutorials for a while and really try it, and just consult the resources you need in that moment, which might mean a lot of Google, Stack Overflow, ChatGPT, So, I mean, of course, there's still teaching, there's still explanation. Like if you send somebody to learn Django and they're fairly new to web development, there needs to be some sort of tutorial, at least exploration. For example, you can do the polls app, but spend an hour, not like a day, right? And then go try it and see where you get stuck, and then search very hard and specific. And then, of course, there's also the power where the coach comes in, because now, hey, coach, I'm stuck. This is what I tried. Can you help me out? And then it's laser focused, right?
Let's start from the bottom and then work our way to the top. Let's start with the for the beginners. Well, let's define a beginner. To Bob Belderbos, what is a beginner?
Beginner Pythonista. So
do they already have programming? Do they know how to? What do they know and what do they not know?
Exactly, because there are two types, right? There's somebody new to programming, and there's somebody that's already programming but new to Python, right?
Right.
So which one? Well,
you pick. Dealer's choice.
Just in general, say the beginner already knows at least the fundamentals of Python, but they might struggle with writing functions or writing classes or fitting it all together, right? So I think for the beginner, they know the concept and fundamentals, but it's very hard for them to piece it together into workable code, right? So that will be beginner.
Okay, and so for that persona in the audience, what advice would you give to that person from a development perspective, other than call you and give you money?
Going back to tutorial paralysis, start building, right? So we already talked about that at length, but what I really like to recommend, and what I did myself, is just find something you care about, scratch your own itch, basically, right? See something you can automate and trying to build that. Just write a single script, a couple of functions, and try to get something working, right? So for example, you can make a little web scraper or something that consumes an API, or script that sends an email or parses a text file, something like that, right? Single task, something practical, but ideally something that is something you want to solve for yourself, or maybe for somebody else. That can also be really good inspiration. Like you have a friend that hits a certain problem, think, hey, I can solve that with code. At least something basic, right? Right, exactly. And that adds a lot of motivation to it. And then you're building, and then as you go, look things up.
Nice. Okay.
And I see.
Oh yeah, totally.
I see we have a question in the chat that I like, where they ask, would a Python beginner need to know CLI navigation, Git/GitHub, or others?
That's a great question, because the minute you want to, I think you should know Git, at least for version control, right? You see a lot of beginners that have avoided Git, and they start to make copies like script underscore v1 and script underscore v2 and script underscore v3. And I think I've done that as well before I knew about Git. So Git already for version control is a must-have, right? But then, of course, you want to also back up your code and store it somewhere, so you can move it to your server. But the most obvious way is to get it on GitHub, right? Where you want to have it a private repo to not expose it to the world, but usually you can just do a public repo, right? So then you need to know about GitHub and the concept of a repository, which is basically a directory of code files, and to be able to push those files over the network to that repository /GitHub. So yes, I think a beginner should definitely get to know that as soon as possible. Yes. Now the CLI, I'm a big fan of the CLI because of that support background and where I started in Unix. Not everybody has that. They rather just, are maybe more Windows oriented and work with file explorers and IDEs. And then you might not, need it that much, but because you might do your Git version control through the IDE, and it's all click based. Personally, I would recommend the CLI because it's closer to scripting, so it makes you faster. I find it also more transparent to do Git from the command line to see what's actually happening. If a beginner would have to know day one, no. But I guess the end beginner phase, I would definitely introduce it. Yes.
And that's
long-winded answer. Hope answers the double question.
I was gonna say you touched on something for me because I find myself I always joking. I mean, because I know I look young, but the youngins. They have been showing me a lot of the new fancy tools that they're using, and they're starting to pull me away from my CLI a bit, and I don't know how to feel about it.
What are the youngsters showing you, Shala?
Like, okay, so I am someone, if I need to go do database stuff, I'll just do it through CLI. Like, I open up my terminal, go do the things. There's this thing called Beekeeper. Oh my God, I should have been using that. It makes it so much easier where I don't have to sit there and, type in my little command to connect to an EC2 instance. And then once I'm in EC2, then I need to go connect to the actual database. Beekeeper makes it so much simpler. So it's stuff like that. I still kind of shy away a bit from using, I guess some people call it click ops or whatever. When I'm doing my Git, I just love typing in my Git commands in terminal. It just makes sense to me versus clicking on the buttons. But, I think it's a nice alternative for those starting out.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, the learning the command line well has really benefited me in speed and efficiency. But for beginner, maybe wait a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, so let's migrate up then to the intermediate level practitioner. Okay. Let's get a definition of what you need to be what you need to know to be intermediate, and then what kind of advice would you give that persona?
Okay, so intermediate, you already know a fair bit of Python, including touching upon the more advanced concepts like maybe decorators. OOP classes, context managers. You also know way more about your tooling like Git and GitHub, maybe a little bit of the command line, databases. So you have a bunch more tools under your tool belt. Probably using AI more as well. So that's kind of the setting.
I've been using AI out of the gate. As soon as I run into a problem now, I'm just like, hey, ChatGPT, what you got?
I know. And we do tell everybody to use it, even beginners. The only thing I keep hearing, like, I got many code written by ChatGPT. I just don't know what it does. So
okay, so let's touch
ChatGPT. Yeah, so
let's go through this because that is an entirely other topic that I definitely want to drill into.
yeah, that should go separate.
We're gonna take that at the end.
Yeah. So that's kind of the setting, right? So you're definitely writing code, and I think from the scope, now you're not writing single script.py files. Now you're working with packages or directories or files. You're making reusable modules. You're importing those modules into each other. You might package your code up and put it on PyPI. You might be deploying your app to the cloud if it's a web app, for example. Are you doing unit tests as a beginner, or are you testing as an intermediate person? Ideally, you would do testing as soon as you responsibly can, but I think intermediate is more realistic. Okay. The scope, because at the beginner you're still just fighting to get something working. Okay. And maybe you make it nicer and cleaner. Again, testing, should do it as soon as you can. And PyTest is an awesome framework and does help you a lot. But yeah, an intermediate would definitely write test. Period.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Is that a good scoping? You think that's?
I agree with that. I mean, yeah, I think that's realistic. I mean, when I was at the beginner level, I wasn't doing as much testing. I am now, ironically, because Mike the man, who is in our audience, has been pushing me to do it. So, I would agree with that assessment. So what is the advice for the intermediate level person then, for that persona?
Yeah, I think there's mindset and there is technical. So I can give 2 tips, right? So code reviews were a game changer for me, right? So I didn't do code reviews day one because I was a beginner and I was a one-man shop. So I didn't really have other developers on the team. I was kind of the only developer on the support team. They were not necessarily coders, right? But once I moved into a software development role, and I started to fix bugs, and then I started to later on develop features. I learned so much from the code reviews, right? So assuming that the beginner doesn't do many code reviews because, again, the level and maybe the exposure to other developers.
Right.
Once you hit that next level, then code reviewing is awesome. You need to push through that barrier, first of all, to submit your code, right? I had Will McCugan on the PyBites podcast, and he also said, like, just push your code, right? Don't be afraid, even if it's incomplete. Only good things can happen. What usually happens, though, and that's the second point, is the impostor syndrome, that we want to sit on our code, we think it's not good enough, and we are kind of apprehensive in sharing it and having it reviewed, right? So we need to break that barrier and really get that code out there and seek other developers to review it, because it's the best learning. Again, just going back to the tutorial paralysis, this is not what the tutorial is going to teach you. Once you have your code on the line and you have to solve a particular problem with your code, there are going to be gaps, obviously, right? That's the nature of the complexity. Having somebody look over your code and give tips, it has taught me many things. I could just otherwise not have learned, because I had to first try it. I had to first submit the code to get there. So I think that's really an important piece for this level, all levels, but typically this happens at this level. And the other thing, as I mentioned, imposter syndrome, right? If you get into intermediate and also later at advanced, the further you get, the more you know, but also the more you realize how little you know, right? So this is something that starts happening at the immediate level. I think is that the Kruger effect, that you have at first you have high confidence and you think you're on top of things, and then you have this shock, like, oh, actually it's more complex and I know far too little. So that's kind of what you're going to hit here.
Yeah, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Yep.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. So that
I was hoping that would go away at some point, but it still doesn't go away.
It doesn't. I still had it and have it. Like, for example, you come share your insights today. That always gets you a little bit Yeah. So we spoke a bit in the PyBites podcast together, right? And that quote, like, real imposters don't have imposters.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, I'm still feeling imposter syndrome. I just try to call it something different.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
totally.
Reframe it like it's not something bad, because that's the thing. Like, we see it as something like we should, get rid of. It's something
right
ugly. But we had Armin Roeniger on PyBites podcast, and he had a great insight. Like, actually, it also shows you care, right? It shows that you're humble enough and you're still learning, and it should actually. What did he say? Now I forgot. But it was something about, like, a combination of it keeps you on your feet, keeps you humble, and it's just it's also related to. Growth happens outside of your comfort zone, as you're saying with this same vBrownBag. Like, you're scared to do it, and that usually means that you have to do it, because that means that you're going to reach the next level, right?
Yeah, I think I would be concerned that if I didn't care, that I'd be turning into a sociopath or something. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it's like it's all about using it as fuel. Like, for me, when I start feeling like, oh, okay, here's this thing that I'm not great at, I go, okay, well, how can I get better at it? And so I just use it as fuel just to like go learn that thing. And then next thing you know, I know that. And then I just keep it going. And then over time, I look back and I go, oh, wow, look at all the stuff that I learned.
Yeah. And then a great tip there is to keep a wins file, to keep a log of your achievements, because it's very easy to forget. And it's good to just, because it is imposter syndrome. It's sometimes you start to compare to others and, look at what they do in the Python space.
Yes.
But try to compare to your yesterday self, right? And having a wins file, and you read then your wins back from a year ago and like, oh, actually, I did advance a lot.
Yeah, so I was just about to say right before you mentioned it, because this is something I've been telling people more and more frequently. I think I just was telling this to, I think, Chris yesterday, but like I focus on me versus and not me versus my teammate, because I have like teammates where they have like 15 years of experience. There's no way I'm going to catch up to that. So I learn from them, but I focus on, okay, where was Shala a year from now? Where was Shala 6 months from now? And that's what I focus on. Because otherwise you could just it could just be, depressing is not the word, but like discouraged. Yeah, and you have to you have to sit there and realize like, well, they have a 15-year lead on you. So duh.
Yeah. Exactly.
So in the show notes that we have, in the intermediate advice section, there's a what to build portfolio assessment tool. Do you want me to share that with the audience? Is that something that people can go take a look at? Yeah,
sure. Totally free. And we use this actually pre-PDM, right, as a brainstorm tool to know what people want to build. So it really hones into your passions, your experience, and your goals, and the ideas to come out of that assessment with 2 or 3 ideas you can start working on.
Nice. Okay. And we'll put the link in there so people don't have to type in all the numbers. So that'll be available afterwards. Yeah. Nice. Okay. So now let's we are going to get to AI, I promise, but I want to knock off the last bit. What is an advanced person? What does that persona look like? And what advice do you give to folks like that? And I am going to put the link in for the PyBites open source specialization link as you're talking about that.
Yeah. So this is actually quite a bit tough because it does look a lot like intermediate, right? In the sense that more fluency in Python, more tools to your tool belt. I think it comes just more down to the experience and the fluency of things. Mm-hmm. So just, when you have a problem, you can just knock that out pretty quickly with Python. You know which libraries to use, you know where to go, you know how to, proficiently conduct code reviews on both ends, right? So it's a lot about, solving bigger problems, I would say, with Python and the tool sets. But also you see more specialization, right? So you might look more into optimization, use asynchronous programming, for example, use more sophisticated tooling overall. Open source, of course, that could actually be for all levels, but I think it's more relatively advanced developers that do it because of all the steps that are involved. Because if you're going to contribute to a fairly complex project, that requires a whole skill set, right? Like getting to know the project, get it running, know where to even touch things, right? The testing that goes with any change, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I put the open source more here. But of course, there are also intermediate developers that do that. And like testing, we encourage people to do it as soon as they're comfortable with. Because open source is at all levels. You can start very small, even with documentation fixes, right? From my experience, for example, what really pushed me was building the coding platform. So under codechallenge.es. That was a major effort. Making a learning platform in Django, basically, and using microservices. In a sense, microservices where code submissions go through AWS Lambda, and AWS Gateway API. That was just a fairly, SaaS payment options and all the bells and whistles of a SaaS product. So working on something complex like that was really helped me get to the advanced level.
We were on the advanced persona, and then we're going to do the advice for the advanced persona.
Yeah, so I said open source, build bigger and more complex projects / products. And I think similar things as intermediate, like the impostor syndrome will get bigger. The more you know, the more you don't know. So 6 support networks. And
so
networking.
what kind of support networks and networking would be good for an advanced program, an advanced persona to seek out? Like what kind of networking opportunities?
So communities, Python communities, you can join ours. You already provided the link, for example. So people with advanced questioning and discussions get a lot out of that. But yeah, this is also about networking, right? Because say you're a more junior developer, you want to grow into a senior developer, that just, there are promotion paths that by the work you're doing that you promote in the same company, but you also should really network, right? And reach out to people. This also goes with intermediate persona, but start to put your work out there, right? Successful developers put a lot of content out there, right? They write blogs, they might publish books. So I think the content creation is very important to get on people's radar.
Agreed. Nice. Okay. So now let's flip over to AI. Let's address the elephant in the room. What kinds of things are happening now? Because I have my opinions about it. It's not something that I would, because there was a study that just came out recently that said that since the advent of AI, more errors have been getting committed to public repositories as a result of people just copying and pasting from Code Whisperer and Copilot and all of those things, instead of what they used to do, which was Control-C, Control-V from Stack Overflow, but at least then it would actually break, and then you'd have to go in and figure out how to fix it. Now it seems like AI is making code a little bit crappier for junior level people, but it is a valuable tool for intermediate and to advanced level people. That's my take on it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mostly agree. Like with Stack Overflow, you had to still fix it, and it was all usually the most upvoted answer. So it was already kind of vetted in a sense, right? Right. Most important thing with ChatGPT, it doesn't give you context, right? So if you take the path of the least resistance and you just copy paste it, you might get you probably get not production ready code, right? It's workable code, but there's still a lot to be optimized and improved. So that's why AI tools work better for the intermediate and advanced developers, because they prompt the tool better, they give more context, and they're more specific in what they put into the tool, but also they have a better vetting process of what comes out of the tool, right? So I find it a big time saver. I definitely use it a lot, but you have to have caution with what it gives back, and you definitely want to, test it, optimize it, etc. So for now, it's still an enhancement tool. Probably will stay that way for a while, given the amount of intervention we need. Also, the fact that programming is so much about soft skills and communication, because you have to invent an idea, you have to do a discussion about the requirements, you have to talk about the code, you have to see if the code matches the requirements. You work with real people, use your software. That's all human and communication, right? And I'm not sure how soon and if that even can be replaced. The only thing we don't know, like a year ago, we weren't using ChatGPT, now we use it every day, right? And that I didn't see coming, right? So there's an exponential thing now after the AI winter, which is kind of weird.
So do you think we are past the AI winter? That is a phrase that has been used a lot over the past 40 years, where there's this peak of AI interest and then an AI winter, and then it comes back and it wanes away. That this cycle has happened a lot over the course of my life. So do you think we are post AI winter now, or heading into Skynet apocalypse? Where do you think we are?
No Skynet yet. It does get warmer in the season, but you're right. It's not the first time that there was a winter and there was not a winter and then there was a winter. That
right.
was cyclic, right? But yeah, if you see what ChatGPT is doing and how we use it, it is something pretty amazing and special, right?
So for the different personas, then just quickly, because we've only got a little bit of time left. If you were a beginner programmer, how would you use AI? If you were an intermediate programmer, how would you use AI? If you were advanced, how would you use it?
I would always use it, right? It's here to stay. It's also kind of a search engine on steroids, right? You can get laser focused with your request, and it can also teach you, right? So as a beginner, you might have it explain you more things, right? Whereas in intermediate advanced, you would use it to actual write code. I use it a lot for test code, for example, because I'm kind of lazy to write that type of code. So yeah, the more level you have, the better you can vet the output. So the more you can leverage for the coding. Copilot is genius as well. That sits right in your editor.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, but I also use it like as a business owner and content creator. It's also just really great for brainstorming and ideation, right? But yeah, again, it can also really explain things well. So I think you would use it at all level. The only thing is with the coding, you would have to be cautious, and the more experience you bring to the table, the more responsibly you can use those tools.
I agree. Mike has a good question from the audience. How do you combat the issue discussed earlier where the code written by AI is not understood by the developer? Yeah,
so that's a great question, because that means that the developer needs to become more familiar with the fundamentals in this context of Python, right? Standard library. So you will have to earn that experience through building apps, but also like we've been talking about building apps and not going too much in tutorials. At all levels, you should keep studying it as well as a craft, right? So although I'm not a big fan of studying tutorials for the sake of tutorials, because there I prefer JIT learning, books like Python Distilled and Fluent Python, those are epic, right? Or Code Complete, those or Clean Code by Robert Martin. Those are classics, right? So those books teach you fundamentals in software engineering, in quality code, in refactoring, the book by Fowler. Those are books you really want to run a study. Design patterns. And especially in Python land, the Fluent Python and Python Distilled. And those will then also just give you better fundamentals in how Python works under the hood. And then that combined with the project building and the constantly coding, that should then over time make you better understand AI generated code. Yeah.
Nice. I was going to say, have ChatGPT repeat it back to me, but use dumber words and explain to me how the code was working. But that sounds way better. I'm going to go with that instead.
I did use it that way for an article today. So I had a script, and I asked it to explain it in 10 bullets, and that does it perfectly, right? So with those specific prompts, it tends to hallucinate less. And then it can, again, be a real good aid in explaining you concepts as well.
Yeah. I had the same thought as Chris did, because I'm real quick. I think everyone knows me at this point that, follows me, where I'm quick to say, hey, explain this to me like I'm 8 years old. It works so great.
That's a great tip. And I think also, Chris, you shared on our podcast always, like, assume the role of blah, and that would then also really help in in framing the conversation better, right?
I'm using the paid for version. So I created an agent called the DevOps Mentor. And the persona of that person it's basically me, but smarter. He's snarky. He uses humor in his explanations, and he has got way more information at his fingertips than I do. And so I chat with him very often when I'm trying to figure stuff out. All right, we are at time. Bob, thank you so much for coming on. Exactly. Well, we can go a little bit longer. Was there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't covered? I don't want to cut this short.
No, I think it's pretty exhaustive. Those great questions, and I just want to make sure if you had any remaining questions that if you wanted those addressed, but I think it was pretty complete as how we had planned it, right?
Mike had a lot of snarky comments and not so a couple of good questions, mostly snark. Shala, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
The only thing that came to my mind that, others may have, including myself, is I'm always asking, when do you know that you've gone from beginner to intermediate, let alone to advanced?
That's a great question. And I think we really struggle with that because for many years, I wouldn't consider myself a developer.
That's me.
I was just a scripter. And it was not till I made that transfer inside Oracle and started working for a software developer team for a couple of years that now I'm a developer, probably. It's very hard to call yourself a developer if you just, write code as even in a professional setting for an organization, but where you are the one-man shop or, the only person in a certain domain where you just do a bunch of coding. But I think if you're writing software that other people are using and getting value out of and it works, then I think you're a software developer. But I can totally resonate. Yay! I can totally resonate. I wouldn't call myself that for years after even having built a tool at work that served hundreds of engineers, So it's an interesting thing.
And this is me as a DevOps engineer, and I know full well the number of eyeballs that are on the thing that I'm working on, and I'm still just like, am I a DevOps engineer? No. And then I'm like, yes, I am.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we are, like Shala said, she was measuring herself up against Lance, who had 15 years of development experience in front of him.
That's my DevOps mentor, yes.
I measure myself against the other DAs on my team, like Rosemary, who's got like 20 years of experience in front of me. And I'm like, why can't I be more like Rosemary? And I'm like, well, because I didn't spend the last years being Rosemary. So Bob, to your point, I think it's important that we all give ourselves the grace to be where we're at and just be one day better every day.